if you're able, by show of hands, who in here knows someone currently who has been or at some point in time was incarcerated? Okay, if you would, keep your hand raised if that person was either a family member or a close friend. Okay, I see a lot of hands up in the room. Thank you. You know what I recognize? I recognize that though many of us have either been directly or indirectly touched by the criminal justice system, very few of us, especially those of us who are younger, of a younger generation, have not been taught exactly what our constitutional rights are, especially as it relates to police encounters. Now, just a little bit about me. My father is actually a police officer, so I grew up the son of a police officer. I come at this at a little bit of a different perspective, being a defense attorney and being the son of an officer. And just as a side note, I do say police. I don't know who in here kind of grew up in the country, but I was at court like a month ago, and I was at the stand, and I was asking somebody some questions. I was like, "And what did you do when the police arrived on the scene?" And the prosecutor came up to me afterwards. He was like, "Did you just say police?" I was like, "Yeah, that's how we say it where I'm from." So I've gotten a close-up look at the justice system. I recognize a few things. Number one, there are about 19,000 people in the state of Arkansas right now who are incarcerated, right? That's about the size of the city of Maumelle. I know 45% of the people incarcerated are African Americans, right? And although we make up about 16% of the actual state population, right? We spend about $500 million a year incarcerating people. So I'm passionate about making sure that we begin to transform the criminal justice system. And what I really hope for you today is that you get a working knowledge, very basic fundamental knowledge of your constitutional rights. Of course, there are all kinds of different rights. You have the right to vote. You got the right to bear arms. You got freedom of speech, freedom of religion. But if somebody would tell me, where do our rights come from? Constitution, right? Laws. So the Constitution is, of course, the supreme law of the land. Stapled to the back of that Constitution is the amendments, right? The Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments. I want to zero in on amendments 4, 5, and 6, because those pretty much relate to your rights when it comes to police encounters. So, 6th Amendment. Does anybody know what the 6th Amendment right gives you? She just wrote it down. Basically, in a nutshell, it's your right to counsel, right? Your right to have an attorney. So it says that you have a right to assistance of counsel. 5th Amendment, everybody knows the 5th Amendment. I plead the 5th, right? Your right to remain silent. It actually says that you have a right not to be compelled to be a witness against yourself. And it also says that you can't be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. 4th Amendment is the one I want to zero in on right now. 4th Amendment says that, and I'll just read it to you in its entirety. It says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. It goes on to say no warrant shall issue without probable cause, and it has to say particularly the place to be searched and the things or the people to be seized. I like us to have an example. So a scenario. Let's say that we're actually in downtown Little Rock right now, and I'm walking down the street. I get hungry, and I smell some chicken. There's Gus's over there on the right. And then on up the street, I see cash. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go up there. And then all of a sudden, a police officer walks up to me and begins to say, sir, there's been some crimes that have been happening around here. I just want to ask you some questions. Well, if you're writing things down, I would say the magic phrase number 1 in that scenario would be, officer, I'm not resisting, but am I being detained or am I free to go? Right? That's the magic phrase right there. Am I being detained or am I free to go? Because an officer lawfully, and I see we have an officer in the room, lawfully they can't approach you, right? They can't ask you questions so long as they haven't made any type of show of authority, haven't tried to confine you. And a reasonable person in that situation would believe that they're free to go. But let's say the officer says, no, I'm not detaining you, but I just want to ask you some questions. Well, if it's me, I'm going to say, officer, thank you for letting me know that I'm not detained, but since I don't consent to any questions right now, I'm going to go ahead and leave. And at that point, you can literally walk away. Obviously, if they try to keep you there or physically try to restrain you, then obviously don't resist. But let's go a little bit further. If I walk along a little bit more, and 2 more officers come up and they approach me, and they say, "There's just been a robbery in this area. There was a guy who robbed this place, and he was wearing a maroon tie. He had a white shirt on, and he had a gun on. We want to talk to him." Right? At that point, it sounds to me like they might have some type of reasonable suspicion to think that the person that they're stopping, I could be that person, right? So it sounds like a valid stop. And say they want to pat me down, they want to frisk me. Well, in order to do that type of frisk, and some of you probably heard of Terry v. Ohio is the case, the stop and frisk. If they're going to pat me down, then they've got to suspect that I actually have a weapon, right? That I'm actually armed and dangerous. And when they do that pat down, it has to be only for weapons. It can't be for any type trying to find drugs or anything like that. And so when they pat me down, it has to be certain. They have to be certain that whatever they feel is, they recognize that it's something illegal. They can't feel around and manipulate the object in order to determine what it is. Okay. So, what's that?
I say you say that, but they may use that opportunity to say different or do different.
Right, and that's where you recognize your rights. Hey, I would clearly say that I'm not armed, and I would ask, do you have any suspicion, and state that you still don't consent to any searches. At that point, though, let's just go to a different scenario. At that point, let's say I decide to get in my car, and I go pick up my friend, and want to tell Kiara, if you come here for a second, I want to tell her about the situation. So we get in the car, right, and I'm driving, and what kind of car are you going to be driving?
2007 Dodge Caliber.
Dodge Caliber, okay. So I'm driving, I'm telling you about the story, and I get to speeding, right, and next thing I know, the police are behind us, see the blue lights, and he pulls up, the officer stops us. Of course, they have a legal right to ask for 3 things. Everybody know what those 3 things are? Yeah. License, insurance, proof of insurance, proof of vehicle registration. You got to supply that to the officer. Now, the officer also has a right at any point for his own safety or her own safety to ask us to step out of the vehicle. So you can be asked to step out of the vehicle. So we get out. At that point, they can also pat us down if they suspect that there are any type of weapons. You know that. Let's just say Kiara happened to have just gotten back from California, and she had a couple bags of weed in her pocket, and it dropped out onto the floor, into my seat. Right? And so the officer sees it in plain view. At that point, he has plain view probable cause to make an arrest that we have some type of illegal substance. And he says, all right, I'm putting you under arrest. He's putting both of us under arrest. So if you're going to be put in custody, under arrest, and they begin to question you, and he says, well, who'd you get this weed from? Who sold you this? At that point, correct. At that point, you are in custody, right, and you're being questioned. That's where your Miranda rights are triggered. Okay, so under Miranda, whether they state that whether they give you those rights or not, right. So magic phrase number 2 and 3, officer, I do not consent to any searches. Number 1, I'm invoking my right to remain silent, and I'm invoking my right, number 3, to have an attorney present. I would like one appointed. If you got money, then I'd like to call my attorney and go from there. And I'm not going to answer any further questions. Now, if Kiara begins to, let's say she says, you know what, like, I just talked to y'all, I'll tell y'all what happened. She has initiated a voluntary contact with the police, and that gives them an opportunity to resume questioning you. So I would suggest not initiating contact again after you've already stated your rights under Miranda. Another thing, maybe in the car situation, if there's a canine, the canine can sniff around the car to determine if there's any drugs or anything that's not a violation. Now, if this was your house on your front porch, and they're sniffing and doing some type of investigation, that would be considered a search under the Fourth Amendment, right? And so you gotta have a search warrant for that. Like, just to push us a little further when it comes to the warrant stuff, I would definitely ask because you know it's got to be signed by a judge, right? It's got to be particular to you where they're going to search. I would look and say, okay, well, is this your address, right? What are they saying that they're going to search? And so be clear about the warrant. Now, of course, there are exceptions to the warrant requirement. The number one exception, which you all probably have figured out by now, is consent. If you give consent for the officers to do a search, then they can do that search. I would like to do another scenario, because maybe this is something that comes up too. Let's just say that there are two people. You two have a house together, and I, as a police officer, come up, knock on the door, and say, hey, there's been a lot of crimes going around in this neighborhood. I just want to come in and check things out if it's okay with you. Now, you, at this point, don't know your rights, Kiara, and so you say, well, sure, officer, we got nothing to hide. Come on in and take a look around. You, sir, of course, knowing your rights, would say what to the officer?
No, sir. Yeah, I did not allow you to come.
And what's the basis for that?
No proper cause, no warrant, no...
Right. I can't allow you into my house, officer, without a warrant, right? And I don't consent to any searches. Now, if you leave the house, I come back and you're gone, and both of y'all are on the lease, both of y'all pay the rent and all that, and Kiara says, yeah, I told you could come in earlier, come on in. Now, I can actually come in at her consent at that time because you're not there, protesting or saying that I don't have consent. You can also, another thing with consent that you should know is confined to whatever length or whatever area that you give it. So if they say, if I say, yeah, you can come in and check my kitchen, but that's it, then they only have consent to check the kitchen. If you say, okay, that's it, I actually want you to leave now. Well, you can terminate the consent at any time. But if they found any type of illegal objects before you terminate it and revoke their consent, that's going to be obviously used against you. Yes.
So the I do not consent is, that's solid.
That's solid.
It's solid. So, but does it have to be said exactly like that? Can I say, man, I don't want you in here. Or you could say, this is my house and you're not invited to come in. How do you have to say those things?
I'm ending this search.
Right.
I'm ending your time here in my house.
Well, yeah, at that point, they shouldn't be in your house. They definitely should be outside. But you can say however you want to say it, like to communicate that, look, I'm not allowing you to come in my house. Yeah, you can't come in. I'm sorry. Right. You're not coming in here without a warrant. However you want to say it. I just say the language of consent, because if anything does happen, you stated, especially if they have a body cam or something like that, I've clearly stated I don't consent to this search. There is no ambiguity about this. Yes,
But what if he's gone and like you said, Kiara allowed them to come in and they find something?
Well, again, she can only authorize the officers to search that's with areas within their control. If it's a locked bedroom, now they can't go in there. She's not authorized to give consent to his bedroom or something like that. But common areas, they can't search.
Well, my probation officer said that if I come in contact with an officer, they can search me. What is that about?
Okay, so this is another thing I wanted to mention. There are several exceptions to the warrant requirement. That's one of them. If you happen to be on probation or on parole and you have a search waiver on file, unfortunately they can.
Come to your house?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they can do that search. So you definitely need to be aware of that. At any time, and make sure that there is a signed parole waiver on file saying that you waive the right to for them to search. But generally, unfortunately, that happens a lot with our clients. They have been on parole or are on parole, and those searches have already been waived. Yeah. I think this gentleman has.
All right, say the same scenario, like you say, they came knock on your door and they ask, it's been crime going on around this neighborhood, do you mind if we come in? And they smell the odor. Are they allowed to just come in like that?
So your house is different than a car. So if they're gonna come into your house, they do need to have a warrant. So I would insist on that still. Now, if they see in plain view, you open the door wide open and they see some drugs in the house, that's plain view. At that point, that's probable cause, that's the exception to the warrant requirement.
But if they just smell it,
Generally, they're probably gonna, in that situation, gonna need to get a warrant.
Okay.
But obviously, go ahead and make that statement, like, I'm not considering the searches. If they insist, obviously don't resist, because you can end up with another charge by resisting. I think that's what it is. Ma'am.
Okay, I am on parole, and I do have a search waiver on file, but if I live with somebody else, can they only search my area, or can they search the whole place because I have a search waiver on file?
The search waiver is, so you're at your house at this point?
I'm not right now, but I am gonna move in with my aunt. I'm just saying, if they were to come in her house and they were saying, we want to search, well, they could only search my area, right, where I sleep at and all that.
Well, you gotta be careful with that. I don't know exactly what your waiver says, but if you consented, and especially if you said that whatever dwelling I'm at, like they have consent to search, they may be able to do that, especially if that's your place of residence. They probably would be able to search that area. I'm sure probation has already come out to your house or something like that. They're authorized to come out and do these searches when probation is there too.
Okay.
So, I think.
Okay, earlier you stated that if the police officer were to put you in the handcuffs and at this state you are now arrested, and you said something about the canine going around to make sure if there's any illegal substance or anything. So is that still going against the Miranda rights? Like with them still doing a search and procedure process?
At that point, they're allowed to search. You've been arrested. It could be a search incident to arrest. But what my point was with the dogs is not actually, there's no violation. There's not really considered a search. If it's searching, if a dog is sniffing the car and they get alerted to something, then that's just another way that they can establish probable cause that there may be some illegal substance.
Right. So they would be held against you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
One more question. It's touching on what they said. Okay, for example, I have a parolee in my house right now, and his search waiver does say that if he's, like, say for instance, he's in my car, they can search my entire car. What I'm saying is, if he's in my car and he's registered, like with his parole office, he's registered to my house. If they search the car, if they find something, can they come in my house and search my entire house just because he's on parole and he was in my car and they found something?
He's waived his rights. I mean, they can search.
So that means they can search my entire house.
Yep.
He's in your house. Last one. I see your hands pointing in a different direction. I know the gentleman up there had his hand up.
I got a question. It's like two questions, really. Somebody pull you over and say they find something, say they find marijuana, 10 grams. It's not equivalent to what you have in your pocket. Say you got $2,700 and
Seems real specific.
yeah.
I'm not giving legal advice, but I will talk in hypothetical.
You got money in your pocket. He pulled you over for speeding, so you got a possession. But he tell you, okay, I might throw the marijuana out or whatever. But when he see the money in your pocket, his attitude changed and whatnot. So now he confiscates your money. And he booked on the charge says misdemeanor possession with intent to deliver. So he booked you in on that charge and you get in jail on that charge, but they don't have no regulation of your money, or they don't give you no receipt, they don't even tell you about it.
So you saying the money, they kept the money?
You still haven't had no type of communication, you can call, they tell you, hey, you can do this, other words, that's what they tell you.
Yeah, somebody got your money, but here's the thing. This hypothetical person, but
The judge has said, yep, you had this took away from you, but they would not acknowledge.
now there is something called, I won't address that directly, but there is, something called forfeiture. Now, if any illegal items were seized at that time that were involved in the act of crime or whatever, and you are found guilty, then there are certain forfeiture situations where you can forfeit that. Now, I don't know all the details about the money that was missing. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just a sack of marijuana. That's it.
Right. I definitely, if they're suspecting some kind of wrongdoing by the officer, I definitely make a complaint on that. But otherwise, if there's been a plea of guilty and there was some type of forfeiture,
I mean, the charge don't even exist, period.
right.
So they changed the charge. They book you in on the one charge that don't exist, then they change the charge. You see what I'm saying? They book you in on the charge for to keep the money.
Might I say that this is, we don't want to get into any personal vendetta. All it is that we want the speaker to let us know, to teach us, or to tell us something that we don't know. For example, our rights and those kinds of things, and not necessarily what we may be going through at this particular point. You may be able to, if possible, right after the speaker finishes, at the end of the program, that you might be able to speak to him one-on-one if he so desires.
Right. And again, I can't, help with individual cases.
So we would just, if you would, allow him to bring his knowledge of his base of information to you, so that you will know what to expect and what not to expect. Thank you.
To be honest, I really think we hit on most of the highlights of things that are going to happen. I would just let you know again, when it comes to the warrant, those exceptions, yes, they need a warrant. Yes, that requires probable cause particular to you, but there are situations where there are exceptions, consent, plain view, exigent circumstances, if there's some situation where drugs or something, there's a risk that they may be flushed down the toilet or something like that, and that's an exception. Hot pursuit, you running from the police, then you run to the house and say, no, you can't come in without a warrant. Well, you're in hot pursuit, so that's going to be an exception. Search incident to arrest, and of course, ma'am, as you mentioned, if you are on probation or parole, they have any type of reasonable suspicion, they can, of course, search because you waived it. So I would just reinforce, if you take nothing away, the 5 phrases that I mentioned. Number 1, if you're approached on the street, officer, not resisting, but are you detaining me or am I free to go? If you're stopped and you've been arrested, I'm invoking my right to remain silent. I'm invoking my right to an attorney. Not going to say anything else until then. I don't consent to searches. And if you're in your home, of course, if they don't have a warrant, officer, I can't let you in. And that's really pretty much all you need to know in terms of your immediate rights as they relate to the Fourth Amendment. This last thing really, I guess, doesn't have anything to do with know your rights stuff. I just want to say it because I see so much every day. I'll say this. Number 1, I don't really believe that the enemy of justice is injustice. I don't believe that. I think the enemy of justice is indifference. Not when bad people do bad things, but when good people just don't do anything. And I think a lot of people are in a space, especially in our country, where we know the system is broken, but it's all the way over there and I'm all the way over here. And there's this gap, and we feel like, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. I just would challenge everybody here to really begin to try to shrink that gap in your own life. I don't know what that looks like. Some students here might end up wanting to go to law school and be an attorney or prosecutor or a defender, whatever. That's good. That may be your path. For some people, it just may be, if you're a teacher, and you educate yourself about the school-to-prison pipeline, and hey, I'm going to do an after-school program with some kids. Or, I know some people like here are real politically active. I might go up to the Capitol and do some lobbying for trying to get better mental health opportunities for people in prison, better conditions, eliminating death penalty, whatever that looks like for you. I would just challenge everybody here to kind of lean in. And obviously there's a lot more we can't. There are whole classes on constitutional rights, so we couldn't hit everything today, but I definitely encourage everybody to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.